Today is November 10th, 2020. My name is Aaron Cervantes, and I'm going to be interviewing Father Jorge Gómez for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor those wishes. Also, if there's something that you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with the interview procedures before we continue. So I will ask a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question.
Okay.
Do you agree to give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview or other materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
I do.
Do you agree to follow the UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
I do agree.
Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for the intention of the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I do.
As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We used information from the pre-interview form to help in the research. The entire form is kept in secure Voices server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voices sends it to UTRGV Library Special Collections and Archives, we would have stripped out any contact information of yourself or family members so that it will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible to UTRGV University Library. The final 2 questions to ask is for your consent on what I just described.
Okay.
Do you wish to share the rest of your interview for public file available to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives?
Yes, I do. I wish.
On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voices receives requests from journalists who wish to contact interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent to share your phone number or email with journalists?
Yes.
Thank you for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean a lot to us at UTRGV Special Collections. I look forward to see what you have to say in the interview questions that follow.
All right.
I would like to start off by saying thanking you, Father, for your time. Know that your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and the Voces Project. Particularly for us at UTRGV Special Collections, we are committed to preserving the stories of Mexican Americans and Latinos of South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, and those who work closely with those populations during this COVID-19 pandemic. And because you are a priest at the Diocese of Brownsville and the current rector of the Basilica of Our Lady of San Juan del Valle National Shrine in San Juan, Texas, and because you as an administrator have been forced to make tough decisions regarding the management of the Basilica, its staff, and pilgrims. I would like to start off asking you if you could share a little bit about yourself with us, a little bit about your background, where you are from, and how it is you came to the Rio Grande Valley.
All right. I'm originally from Arandas, Jalisco, Mexico. I entered the seminary in my home diocese of San Juan de los Lagos back in 1992. And when I was about to finish college, it's that the bishop of the Diocese of Brownsville at that time, Bishop Raimundo Peña, he went to that part of Mexico to invite some of us to come and study for the Diocese of Brownsville. That's how I ended up accepting the invitation and coming to study for the Diocese of Brownsville. So I moved in the Valley in 1999 to study English at Brownsville, Villa Maria Language Institute.
Thank you so much. The next questions that I want to ask about is regarding your first understanding with COVID-19 and the first encounters you had with it. So how did you first hear about COVID-19? Did you hear about it on the radio, TV, friends or family?
First encounter or first time I heard about COVID-19 or the coronavirus was in the newspaper from Guadalajara. I read the newspaper from my state every day online, and they began to publish something on the coronavirus, but that it was far, far away somewhere in China. It was probably in December. And then as we moved into the new year, that's when I began to hear more about the coronavirus moving into Europe and all the problems it was causing there. And then in New York and LA, and then moved into South Texas. That's how it was a progression until it got to us.
Okay, and what was your first reaction when you first started hearing about coronavirus making its way to the valley?
I think for me at the beginning was like, oh, it's a disease that is far away, like the Ebola some 10 years ago, that it caused some problems in Texas, but I never thought it was going to be that strong. So as time progresses, I'm hearing of people dying and people getting infected, and some states up north having to shut down the economy and having to shut down schools and churches, malls, stores, until it got to us. No, it is real and it is dangerous.
Definitely. Over the last few months, what news medias or other sources do you rely on to keep informed on coronavirus?
Internet and newspaper and television.
Would you be able to share with me what you understand about COVID-19 as an infectious disease?
I think we know less than what we wish we would know by now, because it's been in the United States for almost a year and we still don't have a vaccine. We still don't know the impact it has or the aftermath of the illness for those who survive it. I wish we would know how to treat it now and how to prevent the effects in the people that has had it now.
Definitely. Would you take the first COVID-19 vaccine available on the market?
I'll be very honest with you. I would take it if Dr. Fauci takes it. Doesn't matter, no? If Dr. Fauci takes the vaccine, I'll take it.
Definitely. Do your family members hold the same beliefs about COVID-19 as you do?
I think like in every family, there is some members that really believe and take precautions, and the younger ones are like, oh, it's not for real, or God, it's not that bad. I think it's the two poles. I have family in both sides of the spectrum.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your responses to these last questions. I would like to continue the interview by asking you about the suspension of public mass and the closing of the Catholic churches in the US, but more specifically here in the Rio Grande Valley, Diocese of Brownsville. As of March, in March of 2020, Most Reverend Daniel E. Flores, Bishop of the Diocese of Brownsville, called for the closing of Catholic churches and the suspension of public mass. For the first time in the diocese's 50-year history, as a precaution to the pandemic, calling for local parishes to live stream the mass and other devotions, as it was noted in the Valley Catholic that Bishop Flores celebrated the last public mass before the allowing of a soft reopening in May 2020 at the Basilica on March 19th. Would you be able to share with us how you and other priests of the diocese found out about the closing of the churches and the suspension of the public mass?
First, let me tell you that I think it was a very wise decision to close the churches, because in the Basilica, it's the second most visited shrine in the United States and Canada. So we would get 20,000 people a week. And on Sundays, probably 7,000 to 8,000 people just on one day. By Bishop taking that decision to close the churches, not only the Basilica, but all the other 72 parishes in the diocese, it was a way of preventing more infections. Yes, the way I heard of it, we had the deacons retreat, or those who were going to be priests or had already ordained priests. They were having the retreat here in San Juan because Bishop Flores was the retreat master, and he was going to go to Houston or to Louisiana to lead the retreat. But at that time, Louisiana was a red spot, hot spot in the nation. So they decided to come to San Juan and have the retreat here. And in that week is when he decided that the churches need to close down. So he asked me if they could have the last mass with the deacons that were in the retreat and the faithful here in the Basilica, and that's how it happened. We had the last public mass with Bishop Flores on March 19th, the Feast of St. Joseph.
How was the atmosphere at the Basilica with everyone present, fully aware that this would be the last public mass for an unforeseen period?
It was a touching moment. It was moving to see a lot of people crying because they knew that for some of them it was going to be the last time they would come to mass, as it happened to some people that later get infected and died of COVID. When they found out that it was going to be the last mass in public or open to the pilgrims, we got a lot of people coming to mass that day, and Bishop Flores and Bishop Mario, myself, we celebrated that mass. It was sad, and for being the first time in history that the Basilica was not going to have pilgrims inside. After mass, people stayed there praying and crying and telling me, so I'm not going to be able to come and see the Virgencita anymore, and just for a while, But it was a sad moment, but at the same time, it was some necessary action that needed to be taken.
Definitely. Was the Basilica prepared for the live streaming of masses and other services?
Thank God we were, because we were live streaming the masses and healing services since the previous year. We had probably been into that modality for almost 6 months. So by the time COVID came and we had to close the Basilica, we were already live streaming the masses in YouTube and Facebook.
Definitely. My next question is, you celebrated the mass, that first mass with no pilgrims attending. What was that feeling? How were you feeling at that moment?
Yeah, it was hard because I'm used to celebrate the mass with at least 2 or 3 more answering and with your spirit or amen, and having to celebrate the mass in front of 2 or 3 cameras at a time, and knowing that people were watching the mass at home, not only here in the Valley, because due to the pandemic, a lot of people were confined in their nursing homes or hospitals, and the way to watch the mass was through their phones or computers, laptops, and I knew that people were watching us not only here, but in Mexico and some other places. So it was kind of weird at the beginning. I needed to get used to celebrate mass in front of cameras. and with no people answering. But
What
at the
kind?
same time, I needed to keep focused that the mystery that I'm celebrating, the sacrament that is there, regardless of the presence of the faithful or not, it's still happening. The sacrifice of Christ on the altar is still happening.
During this close down time, did you hear from any of the pilgrims of the Basilica?
Yes, I was constantly receiving emails and phone calls, texts of whoever has my personal phone asking me, when are you gonna let us go in the Basilica? Can we go at least around to pray the Stations of the Cross? Because you know that we get hundreds of people every day that come either to run around the Stations of the Cross or to pray. And especially in the most difficult months, we had to be close to everybody because that was what the city and the county was requiring, that parks and every other public venue need to be closed.
During this time, the Basilica was approached by Telemundo to broadcast its mass. How did this come about?
I don't know how they heard about us, but it was a blessing for the Basilica. I received a phone call before Easter Sunday, before Palm Sunday, I think it was Palm Sunday, that they were interested in streaming the mass in Telemundo for the Spanish-speaking population, not only in the Valle, but it was in 33 different stations they have all over the country. So we had people watching the mass from the Basilica in New York, in California, Houston, Chicago, Indiana. And after that, I started to get people, that's such a beautiful gift because we can go to mass, but now we can watch it on TV, especially elderly who don't have a YouTube or Facebook, or they're not familiar with those platforms. So they were watching the mass on a regular TV, old-fashioned TV sometimes. So Telemundo had asked me to do it for 2 Sundays, Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday. And when they saw the amount of people that was watching, they decided to keep it going for several more weeks. So we kept the mass on Telemundo until probably it was after Mother's Day.
Wow. After the broadcast was stopped by Telemundo, did you receive any outreach from the people that had seen the mass that maybe didn't know about the Basilica?
Yes, specifically from 2 people. One woman in New York who said that was the only way she could watch the mass because she was not still going out, and she doesn't have a Facebook, she doesn't have a YouTube, but she wanted to continue watching the mass, but I said, no, it's not up to us, no, it's Telemundo. So the way they did it, they were feeding from our YouTube live streaming. They were not here with their cameras, no, they would get it from our cameras, from our YouTube, and then from there it went to the nations. One of the experiences I had in that time, there were some people who were telling me, Father, are you aware that we have some hearing impaired people that they used to go to mass when there's an interpreter and there's a sign language, and now they can't. So that was a challenge. I know some sign language, so I called one of the interpreters that I know, and she came, and we were signing the masses, 2 masses. We did 2. It was a great experience, and people watching the mass, and at the same time, those who are hearing impaired, they were participating. It was a blessing.
Definitely. I'm sure it was very appreciated. I would like to move forward and ask you some questions regarding the administrative challenges that you faced, especially during the stay-at-home orders. With the stay-at-home orders issued by Hidalgo County, what did that mean for other entities on the Basilica grounds, such as the Basilica gift shop, the hotel, and the cafeteria?
We needed to close down the cafeteria, the hotel, and the gift shop because they're considered not essential. And since pilgrims were not traveling, they were not coming, we needed to close everything. The gift shop, we kept it open until they said it is not essential. So our sales were online only.
Definitely. Did you offer any curbside services through your online store?
Not curbside, but we did a delivery. We mailed out whatever they wanted to buy.
Okay. Did this cause you to put any have to furlough or lay off any employees such as custodians, groundkeepers, gift shop employees, or other clergy?
Unfortunately, I did have to take those decisions because since the cafeteria was closed down, we didn't need the cooks and the dishwashers, the ones who were working there. The same happened at the hotel since it was closed for several weeks. So I didn't need to have all these people working or in the payroll when I didn't have anything for them to do. The same happened at the gift shop. I had to put in furlough some of the employees, and at the renewal center as well, because the renewal center is booked for a year in advance for retreats and conferences and meetings. And we're in November and we still don't have anything on schedule until January of 2021. So yes, we did go down in numbers of the employees.
How has this pandemic affected the Basilica's finances?
Well, I think like every institution, we depend on donations, especially the Basilica and pilgrims that come and leave their donations. Since we closed the Basilica for almost 8 weeks or a little bit over 8 weeks, pilgrims were not allowed to come. Thank God there's some generous people and pilgrims that were still mailing in their checks and sending their donations. We were able to keep the Basilica going.
Does the Vatican assist churches with finances during COVID, or perhaps any other agency?
Not the Vatican. The diocese, through a network of generous donors or benefactors they have, the diocese has been able to help parishes who are in critical situation, that some of them were already not having enough money to pay the bills, electricity or water. No, now the diocese is helping some of the parishes. Thank God, and the generosity of our pilgrims, we are able to keep the Basilica open now and still running with the money they're giving the Basilica.
Definitely. Were there any stimulus packages offered for Catholic churches?
It was. No, we took advantage of this and very grateful to the government. We had the PPP, payroll protection program. They helped us to keep some of the employees on the payroll for some weeks.
Perfect. With the reopening of the Catholic churches in the diocese, what regulations did the Basilica put in place for the protection of its pilgrims and its employees?
Everyone who comes into the Basilica needs to be wearing a face mask, hand sanitizer at the entrance and at the exit doors. We have several doors at the Basilica. We're using only the main doors to enter and the side doors to exit. That way we avoid people crossing with each other and avoiding the infections. So we have the main entrances to go in and then the side doors to go out. Plus the employees inside or outside the Basilica, they need to be wearing a face mask when there is someone else. We are accommodating the pilgrims that come to Mass in every other pew. We don't see them in every pew, and we are very strict on making sure that if they don't come together or from the same household, they need to keep 6 feet apart, even when they're in the same pew. If they come as a family and in the same car, they can sit together in the same pew, but always keeping the rule of every other pew and 6 feet apart from each other.
Thank you. I would like to continue with some questions regarding sacraments and other services offered to the faithful in the Rio Grande Valley, specifically with the anointing of the sick or last rites. did this cause a change during the pandemic?
Yes, the hospitals were very strict on not letting anyone go in. And if they needed the anointing of the sick, only the priests who are assigned to the hospital as chaplains, because they received a special training and uh, the codes on dressing and all that. So they were the only ones that were able to go into the hospitals.
I know that the Basilica doesn't offer funerals or masses of resurrection. Um, but do you know of how that changed in the parish levels?
Yes, some of the parishes that I know, they reduced the number of people that go to the funeral to 10 or 15 at the most, depending on the size of the church. If it is a big church, they can accommodate more. But if it is a small church, they max is 10 people that they can accept for a funeral.
Thank you. Would you be able to share with us some of the happiest or saddest moments that you've experienced as a priest during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think the happiest moments is when I see the faith and devotion of the people, the pilgrims that come. I'm going to tell you one of the few cases that we had during the pandemic when the Basilica was closed. Through the general email address of the Basilica, I received an email from someone who was coming all the way from Amarillo with her dying grandfather. His last wish was to come and see the Virgin of the Basilica. So she emailed me when they were already in San Antonio, and it was on a Saturday, and she said, it's 6 in the morning and we're leaving San Antonio. We're expected to get to San Juan at 10 a.m. So by the time I saw the email, they were already halfway. And to me, it was heartbreaking to say, no, you can't go. It's a regulation from the city or the county. I prayed and I said, God, help me on this, because I know I can't do this, but these people have been traveling for 10 hours on an RV and some other vehicles. The whole family came, and I told him, come through the back door. I'll open the door. Just make sure you keep the 6 feet apart and you go in, pray in front of the Virgin, take your grandfather. It was moving to see that poor man came on a bed, in that RV that they rented to come all the way from Amarillo, and to see him looking at the statue of our Blessed Mother and to see the whole family in prayer, that was impressive and moving. It was a little bit before the 11:30 Mass that we live streamed. And since the Basilica is very big, and they begged me, can we stay for Mass? We haven't gone to Mass in weeks. Can we stay? I said, yes, but just sit one in every pew and every other pew. I don't want you together. So it was about 15 of them who came all the way. And when they went back a few days later, I got an email from the granddaughter who had emailed me first, telling me that his grandfather had died and her grandfather had died, and that she was very appreciative of the fact that we opened the Basilica for him to have his last wish, to see the Virgin. And the saddest moment, there's many. There is stories of people who come, they walk with the ashes of their loved ones to the Basilica, because it is very important for them to bring the cremated human remains of the body for Mass, especially in the Hispanic and Mexican American people. It is not, they wouldn't accept only taking them to the cemetery. They need to bring them to Mass or to church. And since some of the parishes were not offering the services or the Mass of Resurrection, as you mentioned before, I decided to set up a little altar with a cross, white cross, and little altar in there. People don't call before, they just walked in with the box of the cremated remains of the human body. And so I instructed the sacristans and those who work inside the Basilica, if you see anybody with a urn of ashes, just tell them if they want, we can put them there. So we've been doing a lot of those. People just walk in and they say, oh, I didn't know you were doing this, but thank you. And I do the blessing of the human remains, and at the end I do the prayer of commendation, and that's what we can do. And people are very appreciative of little details like this.
with the mandatory cremations that we are experiencing right now, do you see a need that maybe is currently not available or offered in the UTRGV, like the mausoleums for the niches?
Yes, definitely. It is a need in our diocese because a lot of people, it was not in their plan to cremate their bodies, but since it is mandatory, especially of those who died of COVID, uh, we don't have a church or a place in the diocese that have a mausoleum. We're planning it, and hopefully it comes to a reality in the Basilica that one day we will have a mausoleum for people to bring the ashes of their loved ones.
Perfect. I want to go into the final questions here. I know, being the rector of the Basilica, you have your schedule full. Um, but I want to continue with asking you: are you satisfied with the local response to COVID-19 throughout the diocese?
In some areas, yes, but some it is contradictory sometimes that they're enforcing too much in closing the church and keeping it only at a 50% or 25%. And you go to La Pulga and you go to one of the stores and people are just scrambling with each other. But yes, they don't want to let the churches get more people because it is a point of infection. But our authorities really taking care of people in La Pulga or centros comerciales, wherever they go, that you see people not keeping safe distance, not wearing face masks. I think in the church where the churches, especially, I speak for our Catholic churches, I don't know the denominations, but the safest places to go is one of the churches because we sanitize the church after every service or mass. We make sure that we have hand sanitizer, that we clean the church, that everything is in perfect conditions for the people to feel safe.
Definitely. Are you satisfied with the state response to COVID-19 led by Governor Abbott?
I think the measures they're taking there are just within the range of what we need now. Some of the precautions they're taking, like closing the bridge, I think it's a little bit too much now because it's been closed since March between Mexico and Texas. And you know that the economy of the Valle depends a lot on the Mexican travelers or tourists. But yeah, they can fly into San Antonio or McAllen, no? There is no problem if they fly, but not crossing, land crossing. It's like, I don't find sense on that.
Definitely. What about the national response to COVID-19 led by President Trump and his administration?
Not politics.
Definitely. Um, if you had the power to respond to a COVID-19, what would you do differently, if anything?
I think enforcing the use of face masks, uh, listening to health authorities. I have whole big respect for Dr. Fauci, and I think his recommendations are good, but not taken seriously in some places or by some political leaders. That I think that's affecting a lot of, or increasing the number of cases in the country. I would definitely say face mask is a must, and probably invest a little bit more on scientific research to find the vaccine for COVID.
Definitely. Being that this year was a special year because of the presidential election, and being that our uh, nation is run by democracy, did you vote? And if
I
you did you notice anything different because of the COVID pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic?
The only probably different thing is that they mail out ballots, but I went in person to vote.
Great. Um, the last question, is there anything else you would like to share with me about your experiences with COVID-19 that I may have not asked about?
No, I think you covered almost everything, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you for allowing us to interview you. Like I said before, this is going to be helping us give an oral history of our experience during this pandemic as a community here in the Rio Grande Valley. And being that the Basilica is a special place in the Valley, I did want to take some time to interview you for this.
Well, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Father.
God bless.